This baby. All right. Well, I want to say welcome everybody to tonight's Friends of Taunton Bay presentation and what will be the first of many such webinars in the months and the years to come. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Jerry Monteur. Please don't try to pronounce it at home unless you've had like 8 years of French. I'm one of the members of the executive committee of the Friends of Taunton Bay. Later, you'll be meeting Alice Noyes, the president of our little organization. Now, the Friends of Taunton Bay is a volunteer community organization formed in 1990 to help manage and protect our fragile estuary. We do this through education, research, and advocacy. All right, first, a little Zoom housekeeping. As you may have noticed at the top, if you were looking at the slide, we're asking you to mute your audio throughout the presentation. I also want to let you know that tonight's show is being recorded, so if you have to leave for any reason, or if you'd like to watch it again or show it to friends and family, you can do so just by heading over to our website, which is friendsoftauntonbay.org. That's friendsoftauntonbay.org. And by the way, we are in the midst of building a brand new website. We assume it will be a new award-winning website, so stay tuned for that. Working hard on that one. Well, you're about to meet Sarah Redmond, and I assume you're going to have questions for her. In fact, we strongly encourage you to do so. So if you have questions, look to the bottom of your screen and you'll see an icon that says chat. Use that feature. Use the chat feature. Click the icon and type in your question. And once Sarah is finished with her presentation, Alice is going to read your questions so Sarah can answer them. Also, please let us know if you're having any technical issues. We'll try to work them out, but no promises. All right, without further ado, Sarah Redmond is an innovator, educator, and organic seaweed farmer here on the coast of Maine, a recognized leader in seaweed aquaculture. She has extensive experience in seaweed nursery and farming systems, crop standards, new crop development, education and outreach, and processing and product development. She holds a BS in aquaculture from the University of Maine, an MS in marine botany from the University of Connecticut. Plus, she's the founder of Springtide Seaweed, LLC, the only vertically integrated organic seaweed aquaculture operation in the US. I assume she's going to tell us what that means in English. Also, she's a co-founder of the Maine Seaweed Exchange, a nonprofit dedicated to the development of a responsible, sustainable seaweed aquaculture industry. Her pioneering work continues to inspire others to look to the sea for a new paradigm. All right, Sarah, welcome. And I will ask the first question. So we've all heard of harvesting seaweed, but how exactly do you farm seaweed?
Well, I will show you. I will show you the whole show. I have a slideshow that kind of will go over seaweed, and then I have a video that will show you the whole process of farming. So we only have a little less than an hour, so I might have to go through it kind of quickly, but I want to kind of give you guys the broad overview. So if I can share my screen, I will get started. So thank you for inviting me to tonight's talk. I have presented a couple of times at your organization in person several years ago. I'm just going to try to move these images so I can see better. Okay, so can everybody see my screen? Yeah. All right, so I'm from Maine, and I grew up in Litchfield, Maine, in the woods on a homestead. My dad was one of those back to the lander guys that dropped out of college and moved down into the forest and started a homestead. So I grew up in the woods. I grew up off the grid. I grew up working in the garden. And I grew up going to the ocean a lot in the summer. So when I was in what I want in life. So I just combined the two things that I knew I really loved, which was the ocean and the gardening. And so I just sort of invented this idea of seaweed farming, that I thought that would be an ideal sort of job for me. Sorry, I'm really trying to move this screen so I can see. Okay. So many years later, I went to school for aquaculture. Out of high school, learned about salmon farming, ended up working in the fisheries so I could be on the water. And then many, many years later, I ended up in seaweed lab and put together the first kelp aquaculture nursery system, and started the seaweed aquaculture industry in Maine and New England. And was hired by Maine Sea Grant, and they said, well, we have an aquaculture facility in Franklin. So many of you are probably familiar. This is on Taunton Bay. It's the Center for Cooperative Aquaculture Research. And I was placed there as my home office, and I was a Sea Grant seaweed aid extension agent for a few years, and started farming here. And so after a few years of developing the seaweed aquaculture industry and conducting research and doing education, I started my own company, Springtide Seaweed. And that's how I ended up farming up here in this incredible part of the world. And we now have a facility over in Gouldsboro, have farms on Frenchman Bay, and I'll sort of show you that. In order to develop a responsible seaweed aquaculture industry, my business partner and I started the Maine Seaweed Exchange as a nonprofit, and we do a lot of research and education, trying to support people that want to become involved and just try to build the resources that we're going to need. Part of our programming is called the Organic Kelp Collaborative, and this is a concept I think the industry to scale in a responsible, small scale way that supports independent farmers, but that can work together in a collaborative nature. And our approach to seaweed farming and aquaculture really is coming from an organic place, where if you look at land agriculture, we know that organic farming can be beneficial to our health and the environment, and we know what industrial agriculture is compared to that. And so my approach to farming in the sea is really based on those principles. We have a number of research projects through the Seaweed Exchange, and I just wanted to mention this is one of the more interesting ones at the moment. We have a grant from the SARE program. It's a farmers and partnership grant, and we're looking at putting sea urchins on the seaweed farms as a natural sort of diversification opportunity. Sea urchins eat seaweed, so we have plenty of food for them, and the University of Maine Sea Car Center in Taunton Bay can produce the seed. So something just we're exploring. And then one more program that we have at the Seaweed Exchange is called Eat Foss, and we're just trying to encourage people to choose farmed organic seaweed over any other kind of seaweed. So seaweed can come from Asia, it can come from, you know, anywhere in the world, it can be wild harvested, it can be farmed. And so we really want people to be able to make informed decisions about where their seaweed has come from and how it was produced and how it was handled. So I'm gonna just give you a broad overview of seaweed. And like I said, this is a lot of information. I'll try to go a while to get through it, but taking the broad view of our planet really enables us to see it as a plant planet. So it's a vegetated planet. We need photosynthesis to produce all of the food and all of the oxygen, all the energy that we rely on. And so what's interesting about seaweed is people are becoming really excited about all of the ideas around seaweed and all the promise of seaweed, but really it's just a realization of the basics of life, which is converting sun's energy in inorganic elements into an organic form that can be shared by all of life. So when we look at the ocean, often with these satellite view images, we can see the chlorophyll in the sea, but those are sea surface images taking photos of the microalgae. But the macroalgae, or the seaweeds, are the plants underneath the sea that we don't really understand quite as well. And we can't really just take a photo from space. And so looking into this world, luckily it's a very complex world, but luckily it's simple to classify them. They're browns, reds, or green seaweeds. And these are macroalgae, so they were the precursors, understand, as land plants. And this is just sort of a way to visualize time and life. And so if it was a clock and the origin of the earth started at 12 o'clock, the algal kingdoms came around 7 o'clock, and then the land plants came out around 10 o'clock, and then we came out around 11 o'clock. So thinking, when we look at seaweeds, when we think about algae, when we think about plants, we just really have to understand the ancient sort of systems that exist. Seaweeds play a really important role in the ecosystem. So that they cycle energy, like I said, through photosynthesis. So they're able to convert sunlight. All the elements that life needs are dissolved in the ocean. So seaweeds can actually concentrate and pick up those elements from the seawater and concentrate them into their tissues in an organic form that other forms of life can then utilize. So really, really important seaweeds. So part of that is seaweeds take up nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, and then all these trace elements required for life. They provide habitat and food for the marine environment, really important, just like land plants. Provide land and sea linkages. So like I said, all of these elements that are coming from our soils and our rocks and upland are being dissolved into the sea. We can't access them, but seaweeds create an organic form that we can then pick them up and bring them back and feed our soils and bring those minerals back up into the land. They provide a tremendous amount of sustainable natural resources. And of course, they're important for producing oxygen. Some of the really important aspects, like I said, is this ability to pick up these trace minerals and package them in a form that's usable. And so some of these macronutrients are essential for life. So calcium, potassium, sodium chloride, magnesium, sulfur, iron, and then these really, really trace micronutrients that you really don't need very much of, but they're really key for a lot of your biological processes. And one of the most important ones that seaweed provide is iodine. So seaweed is the best source of iodine on the planet. So just to kind of give you an idea of some of the different kinds of seaweeds we have, some of you may already be familiar, but as a review, this is one of the rock, like we have browns, reds, and greens. The browns are the largest of the seaweeds, and there's two groups. There's the rockweeds, and then there's the kelps. So the rockweeds include knotted rack. This particular seaweed is found up and down the entire coast of Maine in the intertidal zone. This is a perennial plant. It is harvested commercially. Probably some of you are familiar with the controversy around rockweed harvesting that's been going on for 10 or so years, but really important intertidal plant, tremendous resource, harvested and utilized for mostly agricultural products. The other rockweed found in this usually smaller and different shape, are the fucus species. This particular one is bladderwrack. This has traditionally been utilized in medicines as treatment for like iodine deficiency. So the other groups of the browns are called the kelps. So these are the true kelps. Sometimes you'll see some old literature or some agricultural literature which will refer to all the brown algae as kelp, but don't get confused. The rockweeds are not kelps. The true kelps are these flat bladed plants. And so these include sugar kelp, which is quite abundant and especially can be found like at Reversing Falls and up under the bridge in Tom Bay. The alaria, which has a very distinctive midrib, so a very different kind of kelp. This is very similar to the Asian wakame and is a little bit harder to find. Then we have the horsetail kelp. It's pretty abundant in the Gulf of Maine and the coast of Maine. This is a blade that splits as it gets larger and is very like a tremendous amounts of alginates. So if you find this on the shore or you take it out of the water and you put it in your backpack, and if it's stressed, it will exude tremendous amounts of alginate, which is very slippery and slimy. It's sort of like the aloe of the sea. For the reds, we have dulse. This is traditional food in the Maritimes and in European countries, really highly desired. We don't have a lot of dulse here. Most of it comes from Canada, Nova Scotia, and Grand Manan. Irish moss, which is a red, a really important red that has had a traditional wild harvest in New England for over 150 years. Because of its abilities to exude, again, this phycocolloid from the cell walls. So like the kelp has alginate, the Irish moss has carrageenan. And so you can just sort of extract this with hot water and it will come right out and sort of form a gel that's then utilized in all sorts of processes. Here we have nori. Nori, as you're probably familiar with, is the most valuable seaweed in the world. It's farmed extensively in Asia and mostly utilized to make those little nori sheets. Either you feed your kids for snacks or you wrap your sushi in. And then, of course, the green sea lettuce. This is just one of the greens that's more that's more familiar to people. This can be found pretty much anywhere. So seaweed in North America, traditional uses, obviously all native peoples have utilized seaweed for ever. If they're from the coast, it's a resource. So you've always been utilized in North America for fertilizer, for food and medicine. It's dries and packs very well. You can use it they would use it to trade with inland tribes for things like moose and deer. You use it all kinds of biomaterials. And then I just include this quote here from a native indigenous member who really, I thought, summed up their approach to utilizing natural and respecting natural resource. And I think it's really important for us to take the same approach. And so all of their work revolved around the careful gathering of what the great nature provided us, and we honored each life, whether it be plant, animal, or marine, by using it and not wasting it, being careful not to over harvest, to carefully cultivate and enhance the resources so they would be there for use by our grandchildren. We believe that all life, whether it be animal, plant, or marine, is sacred and as important as human life. We are but one small part of the big picture, and our food gathering practices and ceremonies remind us of that. So I think it's really important to take this approach of we're not just harvesting, we're not just exploiting, we're not just whatever, we're enhancing, we're a part of it, we respect this place, and really the idea of cultivation is very important. So European influence in our world is very, very important in terms of how our seaweed industry has developed, how people have a relationship with seaweed, how people utilize seaweed, understand seaweed. Food and medicine, especially dulse, Irish moss, and the kelp and the rockweed, very important. People still go down to the shore and gather beach cast seaweed to bring to their fields to feed their soils and their plants. And in the modern world, we also have the Asian influence in the US from a couple of different angles. One was the macrobiotic movement back in the 60s and 70s, the natural foods movement that recommended that you eat 5 to 10% of your diet as seaweed every day. And then also, of course, the rise of sushi in the 80s. And most Americans are familiar with nori rolls, seaweed salad, and miso soup through that avenue. And so a lot of people tend to think about seaweed, they think about the Asian terminology and the Asian types of seaweed, even more than their local native seaweed. So we're trying to change that. Again, very, very important use of of seaweed in agriculture for livestock, supplement, fodder, sea manure, so feed the soils, like I said. And then of course, when we had the industrialization of our world, we needed resources. And so they used to burn brown algae for the ash that could be used in other industries. And then of course, when the wars came, we couldn't get a lot of the resources around the world that we needed, and we turned to the seaweeds to find solutions. And out of that came the phycocolloid industry, which extracts the gelling, the sort of slippery gelling phycocolloids from the cell walls, which include the agar, carrageenan, and alginate. And this is a large scale global industry. So seaweed is good for people, it's good for animals, and it's good for plants, it's good for soils because it contains a wide range of minerals and vitamins and unique components. So for animals, for pets, for livestock, you add it as a supplement, and it can help improve overall health, reduce the need for antibiotics or other medicines, and can strengthen like their nails and make their coat shiny and all sorts of benefits. It can improve the shell hardness of the eggs. It can improve fertility. They feed seaweed to racehorses because it makes them stronger and faster. For plants and soils, again, a great way to bring those materials to feed your soils and your plants. And so all of these vitamins, minerals, compounds, they feed the health of organisms. And so for the soil, it adds a lot of organic material that is very good at holding water. It improves the quality of the soil, as well as the sort of supports the bacteria and the other soil life, and makes these elements available to plants. Plants need all these trace elements as well as we do for certain of their functions, and also can act as a biostimulant. And they have compounds that are similar to plant growth hormones, so can incite different responses in plants, like better flowering or fruiting or other types of vitality. And then obviously we have the global industrial world. And so like I said, the agar, alginate, carrageenan, large global industries around extracting these compounds from seaweeds. They're so complex, we can't manufacture them in a lab. And we use them in almost every kind of industry around the world. So huge demand for seaweed extracts. And now there's this new sort of concept about we can use seaweed for everything. We can make plastics out of it. We can make new kinds of paper and fabrics. We can make biofuel. We can make a lot of medical devices. Just pretty much anything you could make out of seaweed, but it requires a significant amount of bioengineering and infrastructure and all that stuff. Also, we need a good source of seaweed. And so today, there's a sort of a modern rediscovery of seaweed, and part of that is really through this existential threat of climate change, pollution. We're losing our fisheries, the industrialization of the world and the global population, and where we're going to get all the food. And we're losing biodiversity, we're losing species, our natural systems are suffering, all of these things, on and on and on. So there's sort of this idea that, seaweed can be part of that solution. And then for all of these other reasons I listed here, seaweed is playing a role. So people that want to sort of return back to natural systems, people that want to move away from an exploitive system and start to look at farming the oceans rather than just fishing the oceans, and looking at climate solutions. Can we grow enough seaweed to pull out carbon from the ocean? Can we sequester that carbon? Can we use seaweed to pull out excess nitrogen in urban areas where we're just polluting with all of our wastewater discharge? Can we feed seaweed to cattle and it will reduce their methane production? Can we take aquaculture techniques and restore ecosystems, reforest the ocean? All of these things, sort of on and on and on. Seaweed can be used in anything. So you can use it in seasonings. You can use the thickening properties of the gel in the cell walls as part of an emulsion. ingredient. You can use it in snacks. You can use it to replace salt. You can use it for all of these things, for medicine, for plants and animals, and especially for skincare, very good for skincare. So like I said, tremendous source of minerals, trace minerals, electrolytes. It's an ideal sodium to potassium ratio. So many of our diseases are caused by an imbalance of sodium in our system. And so we could rebalance our blood and remineralize our blood. Good source of vitamins, small amount of fat, but the fat it has is the marine fat, the polyunsaturated fatty acids. It has umami amino acids, which make your food taste good. And then these unique carbohydrates that act as fibers, bioactive fibers. And so all of these sort of unique bioactive compounds have all of these properties. And so if you even just do like a basic Google search on health benefits of seaweed, you'll sort of see all of these terms pop up: antiviral, antiparasitic, anti-inflammable, antibacterial, anti-cancer, sort of like everything. It seems like seaweed can do everything. It's a little amazing, but I think that's the nature of plants. And I think rediscovering seaweed is going to help us rediscover plants, and that's really exciting. But specifically for seaweeds, polysaccharides, the alginate, agar, carrageenan, fucoidan, and luminarian, all of these things have been found to have really impressive health benefits in the human system. A good source of the carotenoids, chlorophylls, fluorotannins, all of these compounds have bioactive properties. And so that makes seaweed an ideal ingredient. So if we can just have a little bit of seaweed in our diet every day, we can start to enjoy the health benefits of these promise. So the world needs more seaweed. Where do we get it? Right now, we have a wild harvest industry in Maine, but we also have this newly developing farming industry in Maine. And so, you know, these are a couple of companies you guys are probably familiar with, some of them. Most of them are actually up in this area. So some of these companies are really pioneers in developing harvesting and products from the wild in Maine and in the US and actually around the world. People that have started to get into seaweed have really looked to companies in Maine as leaders, and I've certainly learned a lot from them, and I'm grateful for their experience they've brought. But you can see the global aquaculture production is increasing, and the wild harvesting production is either staying the same or decreasing. And so we definitely are moving towards a need for farming the sea. And so the big question is, how do we do that correctly? How do we do that right? And for us in Maine, we are still very much dependent on a wild fishing mentality and approach to the ocean. And so to try to move to a cultivation or a farming system is a process, and it's very different. And so it should be very interesting in the next 10 years or so to see how that plays out. So it's 7:32 and I want to see everybody here. So let me find you. I wasn't even sure, I couldn't see you. I wasn't even sure you were still there. And how do I stop sharing my screen? Stop share. So I just thought if anybody had any questions, I can stop for a few minutes, and then I can do the next part of my talk, which is a video.
Well, I have a question, Sarah, before anybody else gets to theirs. And by the way, if you have questions, use the chat feature down below at the bottom of your screen. Type in your question, and we'll get to it. But this is a merchandising question, Sarah. If someone wants to buy seaweed products from you, how do they do it?
We have a website, springtideseaweed.com, and we sell online. And you can come pick them up, or I can ship them to you. Right now, that's where we sell. we're trying to get our stuff out in town more, but you know, we haven't gotten there yet.
All right, gotcha. Let me reintroduce Alice Noyes now, and you can actually see her smiling, happy face. Alice is the president of Friends of Taunton Bay. Alice, you have the comm.
Okay. I don't see any more questions here. Oh, here's one. Are you involved with the carbon capture out of Portland? There was a recent NPR story about it. The connection stopped.
I am very concerned about that project.
Yeah, we're losing the connection. Uh-oh. Right there. Oh. Oh, I think we lost Sarah.
One of the issues we face here on the coast of Maine occasionally. So she's probably going to
Oh,
call.
here she comes.
Are you
I'll send her.
with
I'll
us?
send, I'll send her a note. Can Sarah use her phone to connect by voice?
Yeah,
Here she
I'm
comes.
just, I am suffering from rural internet service. So maybe I can you hear me now, or
Yeah.
should I
Yeah.
try to? Okay. So if it's working, I'll keep going. If it stops again, I'll try to use my phone. Very sorry about that.
It's okay.
It's I'm in Goldsboro. So all right, let me just take you on the farm with me so you can see what I'm talking about when I talk about seaweed farming.
Cool.
So I will share my screen, and this video is it's like 8 minutes long, so I'm just trying to save some time towards the end so that we can have some more discussion maybe. Can you all see that all right, or is this in the way? I can't ever tell. Is that in the way? Okay, so okay, so Springtide Seaweed, I founded it 4 years ago. Like I said, I was up here doing a lot of research and ended up on the old cod farm, which actually was previously a salmon farm site out of Sorrento, and was able to partner with the owner of the lease and try some things out. So you can see here, Taunton Bay is up in the left, Frenchman's Bay, Sorrento, Winter Harbor. Our facility, our farms are where it says fish pens off of Sorrento, and then also this little new blue square with the arrow. So those are the two farms that I farm my seaweed on. And then the star over here, South Goldsboro, is where our facility is. Our facility is actually an old fish cannery that was built around 100 years ago. And it's right on the water. Very difficult to find this kind of access to seawater. Of course, I need it for my nursery so I can grow seed in the basement. This is South Goldsboro. There's a little fishing harbor in the summer. There's a couple more recreational boats, but mostly it's lobstering. and really essential piece of working waterfront infrastructure. Over here is just a simple lobster dock and then a boat ramp. These are the products that we make. We make salt-free seasonings. We use seaweed instead of salt. And so trying to help people incorporate seaweed into their everyday diet. The main focus of our products are actually just powders and flakes that we sell as ingredients to other companies that include them in their snacks and stuff. But we try to make a range of these seasoning products so people can have access to local seaweed and be able to incorporate into their diet. So how do you grow seaweed? Well, you have to start at the beginning, which is you go out into the world and you find plants that you would like to grow, and you collect their reproductive tissue. So on the kelps, this is a darkened brown portion on the blade, and you can just cut out, this is called the source tissue, just cut that out. You can leave the plant in the water, it will keep growing. And you take it back to the lab and you clean it up. And this is really just to clean off any of the micro contaminants that might be on there. And then you put them in paper towels and let them dry out a little bit overnight. And then when you put them back into clean seawater, it will actually cause them to release all of their little spores. And then you'll have this cloudy spore solution, which is full of tiny little microspores. So kelps are actually grouped in the protist kingdom because they have these swimming flagella, microstage, which is the spore stage, and then they have a microscopic gametophyte stage, which is what's shown here. And this is where the sexes are separate. There's separate males and females, and they reproduce, and that's when they develop these tiny little kelp plants, which then grow into the large kelp plants that we see out in the ocean. So we do all of this in a seaweed nursery on string wrapped around PVC pipe in seawater tanks. And so we provide them with clean seawater, light, air, and then we seed the string, and the spores will settle on the string and then go through their reproductive process to develop these young plants. On the farm, we have a number of moorings and long lines to put the kelp out. And this is a really very simple system. They're just horizontal submerged long lines. And this is just sort of a graphic to kind of show you from the side. So you have a mooring, and then a line strung in between with buoys holding it up at the surface. So this is what it looks like. The red balls are the mooring balls, and then there's lobster buoys in between to hold up the line. So you tie one end of the string off, put your rope through your PVC pipe, and then you pull down the line and your seed will come off and wrap itself around the rope. That's how you seed the kelp farm. And you put this out in the fall. The plants are very tiny at first. They're only a couple of millimeters long. And you let it grow. It grows naturally, sunlight, seawater, all the nutrients they need come right from the seawater itself. And what's really fascinating about this is it's the, pretty rare winter crop in Maine. So we actually put our farms in the fall when the water gets cold. In winter, they're growing, and taking up all these nutrients that actually increase in the winter naturally because they're not competing with microalgae. And then by the spring, you have this tremendous amount of seaweed on your rope. And you have to figure out how to pull it in and process it and handle it. Also in the spring, it's hard to get out there because of the weather. So we usually start early with smaller boats. And then when the weather gets better towards the end of the spring, we can put in our little harvest barge where it's a little bit easier to bring up the lines and harvest. So we harvest directly into clean, dedicated fish totes with covers. We have a whole process for food handling and harvesting and processing. We want to make sure this is clean and safe and the best seaweed we can provide. So this is sugar kelp hanging in the greenhouse. We use just the greenhouse for drying. This is Alaria. You can see by the midrib there. This is a really tremendous crop for us. Alaria is harder to find in the wild. It's lower in iodine, and it's higher in some of the other really valuable minerals. And so it's a really highly desirable sea vegetable. This is just to show sort of the challenges of harvest season for seaweed. Really starts late March, April, May, June. But recently we've been having a lot of weather in April. This is skinny kelp. It's actually a morph of sugar kelp and very rare, only found on one ledge off a harpswell, but we've been able to cultivate it. This is digitata or horsetail kelp. And this one's a little bit harder to cultivate because it needs a little bit more time, but we're working on it. Since some of the other more experimental crops, we're trying to figure out how to grow nori. So most valuable seaweed in the world. Everybody wants to know, and we're going to grow some nori and then dulse as well. So on an experimental level, we're growing nori, dulse, and horsetail kelp. And on a commercial level, we're growing sugar kelp, skinny kelp, and alaria. So really amazing to be a farmer and to be out there all the time in this incredible area and seeing the life and seeing the seasonality and seeing sort of the dynamics of the ecosystem. Really having eyes on the water, time on the water, having a space where you can observe all of these incredible things. Every time I go out there, I learn something new. It's really just the wonders of gardening in this incredible, ocean space that most people don't get to spend enough time seeing what's happening under the surface and sort of the dynamics of all the life that happens out there. So the question here for us is really, what does it look like in the next 10 or 20 years for the coast of Maine? The wild fisheries are facing tremendous pressures. We have tremendous economic pressures from tourism and people wanting to move to Maine and live on the coast. What does that mean for our access, our ability to have a relationship with the ocean? I think that right now we have a tremendous opportunity to develop new types of seafood systems that will respect and cultivate a relationship with the ocean, but I really think it's important to do it right. And so that's why we spend so much time trying to train and encourage others and build systems that are respectful of the earth and that are, have some humility in terms of understanding how much we don't know and how much we need to learn. And so really we're just at the beginning of this process. But I think for Maine, we have a really big obligation to sort of lead here and really make these values built into our system in ways that our other economic systems aren't allowing. So that's why we are, certified organic. We encourage other people to become certified organic, to really start to create programs where farmers can be stewards and observers of the natural system, to be able to observe some things going on and protect the ocean in ways that nobody is doing right now. So there's all kinds of opportunities there, I think. So I don't know if you guys want to have questions or you want me to talk more about seaweed or what. I can talk about seaweed all night, but.
Well, we have a couple questions. I guess we could start, and that'll lead to other things, right? So are there seaweed blights or disease?
Well, we haven't had any issues with disease specifically, but certainly invasive species and biofouling organisms are a problem, both in the wild and on farms. We control biofouling problems by harvesting in the spring. So the biofouling usually starts to settle around late spring and then becomes really severe through the summer. So we try to just take out everything out of the water. But what you'll see in the wild, the natural stands are suffering from, of course, increased temperatures in the summer, but also sort of invasive species like there's the lacy crust bryozoan, which is sort of creates these white patches and can cover the entire blade, and then the seaweed can't breathe or can't take up nutrients. We see that on the farm only if you leave your plants in through the summer. And like the skeleton shrimp is another invasive. It's a caprellid. It sort of looks like a praying mantis of the sea, and it will like attach itself to the seaweed and all over your lines and sort of eat at whatever it can grab. That's an invasive species that will take over in the summer if you leave your lines out. So I don't know what its role is in the natural systems, but certainly something that we see. But in terms of actual disease, we haven't had any issues. Seaweed is, even in Asia, they don't have a lot of issues with disease with seaweed.
Here's another one. Will you grow nori on long lines or a different substrate?
Nori is, nori and dulse are smaller plants. And so, a kelp can grow 10 to 20 feet long and just be a huge amount of biomass, but a nori and dulse plant, will grow sort of this big. So you need a lot more surface area to grow enough of it. And so that's one of the things that we're exploring in our research is what are the right kind of substrates to grow those plants. And as you know, in Asia, they use nets at the surface for nori. But we can't do that here because we have these huge mats of rockweed that float around, and we'll find those nets. They will find anything at the surface and get into it. And so we're trying to develop new types of vertical systems that can take advantage of underneath the surface, but create enough surface area to grow those smaller plants.
Let's see, here's another one. Is the state of Maine doing anything to allow more commercial access to the ocean?
Well, the state of Maine is actually unique in that it's a state that has an aquaculture system with a process. If you want to go and get an aquaculture lease, you can go and apply for an aquaculture lease. So unlike the fisheries, which most of the fisheries are closed to any entrance, aquaculture is pretty open. So anyone can come in, apply for a lease. It does go through a process, but the state of Maine has recognized, the potential for aquaculture to become a very important player in the coastal zone. So you are seeing tremendous increase in aquaculture leases and licenses, and also some corresponding concern from people who, are wondering about this increase in aquaculture. I would mention, I'm not sure if you guys have talked about this or met with anybody about the most recent salmon proposal for Frenchman's Bay. Norwegian company has come to Gouldsboro promising dollar signs and jobs. And, it looks like they want to apply for 2 large scale, really industrial salmon farm kind of leases right in Frenchman's Bay. So we are terribly concerned about this. This would affect our organic production, our organic certification, as well as impact the health and ecosystem of the bay. So if it's something that you haven't been involved yet, I would encourage you guys to get a hold of Friends of Frenchman's Bay. They've been sort of meeting on this. They're waiting for the application to go in, which they are expecting might happen soon. So we need all the help we can get to sort of help, we should be able to decide what the coast of Maine looks like in the next 10 or 20 years. And it shouldn't be decided by promises of jobs and blah, 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 blah. If it's impacting our environment, if it's impacting our ecosystem, everybody looks to Frenchman's Bay and the surrounding area as a treasure, as a national treasure. And so that's just, something I just wanted to bring up in case I hadn't come across your radar, which I'm sure it has by now.
Yes, it has. We have been watching that and are aware of it. Here's another question. Does all the seaweed farming in Maine occur during the winter only?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
seaweed doesn't do well in the summer. So it's, you know, it's good for us, it's good for everybody, because if we can, you know, have our gear out there in the winter when there's nobody out there, then we're not gonna have, you know, we're gonna have fewer conflicts. And then we pull everything out of the water when the tourists come, when the lobstermen put out their traps. And so really trying to find that perfect seasonality of fitting in and being able to grow this incredible crop when nobody else really is out there.
Do many of the chefs in the area use your seaweed?
We haven't done a lot of outreach for chefs. We do sell to Piquito and Bar Harbor. It's a seafood cafe and market, and they make their seaweed salad, which you can get on the menu when you order something from our seaweed. So we're very proud of that. It's very delicious. And then we sell, Dulcimer Gosa has a little shop now in Gouldsboro. They sell our stuff at their shop. But yeah, you know, we're pretty new at this facility in Gouldsboro. We've just been really trying to work on building our infrastructure. And so, yeah, we haven't done a ton of sort of getting our stuff out there in the local community, but we'd like to do more of that.
So will you grow dulse on long lines?
It's sort of the same thing. We're looking at, we're actually doing some research right now to look at designing specialized cultivation systems for dulse and nori. And really, if we can figure it out, it could be really a big deal, because all of the farms in Europe, they want to grow dulse and nori too, and you know, in the North Atlantic, but nobody knows how. And so we're really looking at it as a huge opportunity. If we can figure out the nursery work and then the cultivation system, we may be opening, you know, opportunities for whole new crops to be developed, which would be really exciting.
Yeah. You got a lot of questions here. Is it possible to transplant a kelp with its holdfast onto a long line?
Yeah. Yep. That's actually how they farm in Asia, that when they want to grow really big plants, they can actually take one plant at a time and insert it in the rope so that it has lots of space to grow. So the holdfast is just holding onto the substrate. It doesn't act like a root system, like if you had pulled a root out of the ground or anything. It's just holding on. So if you can get it into a rope and it will grow around the rope. As long as that seaweed is getting light nutrients and it's in a, you know, temperature space that it's happy with, it, you can move it from one rope to the other. Of course, we don't do that in farming. We have to get all of our seed to attach itself and then put it out on the farm. And then and then we grow millions of blades of kelp on the rope.
I have a question. I read, I think it might have been in the article that Mary did with you in our newsletter, or it was in the newspaper, about the greenhouses. You were seeking help with people setting up a greenhouse so you could
Yes.
dry the kelp. Can you tell
Yes.
us more about that?
Yeah, that's part of the Kelp Collaborative idea. It's we need more processing. But it's processing is as simple as a greenhouse. And most people in Maine have land, and most people have some extra time in the spring. So if we could recruit people that wanted to become processors, we have a whole system where we would help you get certified organic, show you how to do it, bring you the seaweed. All you have to do is hang it up on it's like a big rack. It's like a clothesline. Hang it up, dry it. Usually takes like a day to 24 hours to dry. Take it down and pack it into boxes, and then you get paid, you know, for however many pounds that you can process. And so we just think this would be a tremendous opportunity, you know, whether you're for anyone, but like high school kids, people that are retired, people that are just do seasonal work and they're just looking for extra income, people that would just love to have an excuse to put up a greenhouse in their yard. I just think it's a tremendous opportunity. We would love to find a source of funding to put into the program. So if people were interested, they didn't have a greenhouse, we could sort of find some support to help that process along, because most people are interested, but they don't have the extra whatever it is to build a greenhouse. So this is kind of something I've been thinking about. Like right now we rent a greenhouse over at the CCAR facility, and then we have one of our own here, but we really need like 10 more. You know, like that's how much seaweed we can grow. We just don't have enough drying space. So I just think it's a tremendous opportunity if we could find, you know, the support, I guess, to help fund it.
That sounds really interesting.
You're going to start harvesting when?
We start harvesting, depending on the weather, in April. So April, May, June, July, usually we're harvesting, and we love volunteers. So if anybody wants to come and help us harvest, help us hang, we pay you in seaweed and experience, I guess. It's beautiful to go out on the farm. It's fun to hang seaweed. If you just want to learn more about it, you want to stop by and say hello, we definitely welcome people to come and visit and say hi. So you're all welcome to come volunteer for us if you want.
If anyone else wants to, we don't have a ton of people here, so you would, if you want to ask, just ask a question, you need to unmute yourself. I can't unmute you. You just press on the, where you were muted, just press on it again. I guess they're all shy.
Okay. Well, I think that might wrap it up then. Do you agree, Alice?
I think so. Thank
Well,
you.
Sarah,
Oh, you're going to do the
I was
end.
just gonna say, thank you so much, Sarah. We're pretty sure it was going to be fascinating, and we were right. We really appreciate it.
Yes, well, thank you for inviting me and spending your Friday night with me.
All right. Good luck. Good luck this spring and moving forward. Well, thank you to everybody for joining us. As I mentioned, this is the first of many webinars to come. So join us on March 29th, and we're going to be exploring the life cycles of Maine's amphibians through the lens of Paul Powers, who's a friend of the organization and a good friend of mine. Paul he's a fabulous professional nature photographer. He's also a Maine master naturalist, and he'll be educating us on amphibian seasonal activities, the state status on Maine's native amphibians, and the importance of Maine's Big Night program. Paul's also an environmental educator who donates many of his works to centers and institutions to promote preservation of our wildlife and raise funds for rehabilitation. He's a tremendous photographer. You're really going to get a big kick out of this one. That is March 29th for that webinar. I already know it's going to be great. So that's going to wrap things up for now. Again, our website address is friendsoftauntonbay.org. Check it out. See how you can become a member if you haven't already done so. And so for Alice Noyes and our special guest, Sarah Redmond, I'm Jerry. Thanks and have a great night, everybody. So long.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
All right. Thank you.
That's
Bye.
great. Bye.
See ya.
I'll end the recording.